Alright guys, so today we're reading Flashback 4, the Hamilton-Burr Duel. So I'll be only reading the first section of the book because I don't want to get copyright claimed, and I'm going to skip to the first chapter so you don't have to see the parts you can find online again. So, Chapter 1, Good News and Bad News. Every story must start at the beginning, of course. As the old song goes, it's a very good place to start. To tell the story correctly, we need to go back. Well, actually forward in time. Forward to the present day, and we need to go to a specific place, Boston, Massachusetts. Think of two boys and two girls. They're all 12 years old and in 6th grade, but they go to separate schools. Until recently, these kids didn't know one another. David Williams is tall, thin, and African American. Isabel Alvarez comes from the Dominican Republic. Luke Bohr, which is a white kid with mild ADD. Julia Brennan is a blonde and goes to a very expensive all-girls Windsor school. Remember, I'm not trying to be all politically correct or multicultural here. It's just how it worked out. It just worked out that way. They call themselves the Flashback 4. If that name sounds familiar, it's probably because you've read Flashback 4, the Lincoln Project, or Flashback 4, the Titanic mission, or Flashback 4, the Pompeii disaster. If you haven't read those books, it's okay. You'll still enjoy this one. You really should have read the first three, though. If you have read them, even better. But just in case this is all new to you, a little background information is in order. David, Isabel, Luke, and Julia were recruited by a billionaire named Chris Zandergoth, usually known as Miss Z. In her younger days, Miss Z dropped out of Stanford University and made a fortune by creating an online dating service called Find a Mate. It was so successful because she figured out a way to hack into the computers of the NSA, National Security Agency, which collects emails, texts, and lots of other information about every man, woman, and child in America. Using a very sophisticated algorithm, Find a Mate made it easy to match up compatible people. The NSA never even knew their network had been broken into. Even that, or they decided to keep it quiet or to avoid public humiliation. Hackers just don't like getting hacked. You would like to think that starting a hugely successful dating site, making billions of dollars, and bringing together lots of happy couples would have been enough to make Miss C felt satisfied with her life, but she wasn't. So she spent a big chunk of her Find a Mate fortune, billions of dollars, to create a super sophisticated, high-tech, state-of-the-art smart board. You know the smart boards that you have in school? Well, this one makes the smart boards look like dumb boards. It's a smarter board. Why? Because it functions as a time-traveling mechanism. It's called simply the board. Go ahead, laugh. You've seen it before. You saw the movie Back to the Future. You've seen countless TV shows about people who travel through time. But this thing works. Don't ask me how to explain how. Don't even try to understand the technology. It's for super techies. With the board, it's possible to input any date, time, place, and voila, the person standing in front of it will be sent there. It works. You're going to have to trust me on this one, reader. Why would Miss Z invent her fortune on such a crazy device? Simple. She had two passions in life, history and photography. After developing the board, she recruited the Flashback 4 to travel back in time and achieve photographs of historical events that were not photographed when they first took place. For instance, Abraham Lincoln delivering the Gettysburg Address. There's no photo of it. There were photographers there that day, but Lincoln was finished in 2 minutes, and the photographers didn't have time to set up their cameras. Another example, the Titanic. There's no photo of it sinking. One more, Mount Vesuvius as it was erupting, just before it burned the city of Pompeii in rock and ash. Photography didn't even exist when that happened, so Miss Z sent the Flashback 4 back to the year 79 to take that picture. Those missions weren't easy. Luke, David, Isabel, and Julia experienced things that no kid should ever have to live through. They were almost blown up by a live bomb. They tangled with Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth. They got arrested and thrown in jail. They were locked in a cabin on the Titanic and nearly went down with the ship. They were forced into slavery in Pompeii. The boys had to fight for their lives as gladiators. The girls had to stomp around barefoot in a tub full of human urine. It's a long story. Julia stepped in a pile of horse manure. The Flashback 4 weren't always successful in their missions. They did manage to get photographs of Titanic sinking and Mount Vesuvius erupting. They did not get the shot of Lincoln getting the Gettysburg Address, but as they say, 2 out of 3 ain't that bad. At least the kids survived all 3 missions and returned home safely. There were more than a few anxious moments in there. If you want to learn more about what happened on those missions, read the first 3 Flashback 4 books, but I don't have time to repeat all that gory details right now. I've got another story to tell. It was Friday, right after school, when the members of the Flashback 4 received this text on their phones. Please come to Pasture Company ASAP. Pasture Company, that was the name Miss Z had chosen specifically for time travel research. The slogan was, if I don't see you in the future, I'll see you in the pasture. It had been a few weeks since they gotten back from Pompeii, and the kids were excited to hear from Miss Z again. Maybe she has another mission to send us on, Isabel said to herself when she received the text. Isabel had a couple of hours to kill before she had to be home for dinner, so she took the T, the Boston subway system, downtown to 200 Clarendon Street. That's the address for the 60-story John Hancock Tower. She punched the button on the elevator to take her to the 23rd floor. Through the glass door up there, she could see that David, Luke, and Julia were already waiting in the reception area of Pasture Company. The door buzzed open, and the rest of the group got up to give Isabel a big hug. After 3 missions, the kids had bonded as a group. They had been through a lot together, and it's not an exaggeration to say they have come to love one another. Where do you think Missy is going to send us this time? Julie asked the others. I want to go meet Babe Ruth, said Luke, a huge Red Sox fan. He played for the Sox from 1914 to 1919, you know. That was before they sold him to the Yankees, David added. Ugh, Julia said with a snort. Baseball is such a bore. It's just a bunch of guys standing around spitting and scratching themselves. I'd rather meet Susan B. Anthony. Who's that? Asked Luke. How can you not know who Susan B. Anthony was? Asked Isabel, incredulous. She basically started the women's movement. Luke would only know about her if she played for the Red Sox, Julie said, cracking up the others. The kids were so caught up in seeing one another again that at first they didn't notice the big difference in the reception area of Pasture Company. Up until now, the walls had been covered with framed photos of historical events. Neil Armstrong on the moon, Thomas Edison with his first phonograph, the Wright brothers getting off the ground for the first time at Kitty Hawk, stuff like that. Now, oddly, all those photos were gone. The walls were blank. Missy's assistant, Mrs. Elevator, came out and greeted the kids with her slight British accent and told them to wait 5 minutes. She seemed a little subdued. David picked up a copy of Sports Illustrated from the coffee table and leafed through it mindlessly. Finally, Mrs. Elevator ushered the Flashback 4 into the main office. The photos were gone from the walls there, too. It seemed very corporate and sterile there. Mrs. Z's large wooden desk was in the middle of the room with a small nameplate on it that said Chris Zandergoth. There were 4 chairs around the desk. On the other side of the room was the board. It was connected to a laptop computer on a cart. The board itself was on wheels so it could be moved around. What's going on? Asked Luke. Where's Miss Z? Asked Isabel. She'll be with you in a moment, Mrs. Vader told him quietly. The kids took seats and glanced at one another, concerned looks on their faces. Julie mouthed the words, something's wrong. Finally, Miss Z rolled in on her wheelchair. She looked to be in her 40s, with a round face and dark eyes. Miss Z seemed like she was older than she had been in the previous meetings. Her hair was grayer, her face more haggard. The sparkle that had been in her eyes seemed to be missing. It's good to see you kids again, she said. Smiling, it looks like you've recovered from your adventure in Pompeii. We won't be going back there anytime soon, said Luke. David had to fight a tiger. Worse than that, David said. I had to fight you. Well, all of you did a good job, said Miss Z. I'm so proud of you getting that picture. I wanted to show you my appreciation. Mrs. Vader? Mrs. Vader left the office for a moment and came back with 4 packages that were covered with fancy gift wrapping paper and bows. She handed one to each of the kids. David asked if they should open them now, and Miss Z nodded. The kids tore off the wrapping paper. Inside each package was a picture frame with the photo they'd shot at Mount Vesuvius blowing its top in the year 79. The kids had got out of Pompeii in the nick of time, just as tons of hot ash and rock were starting to fall in the city. It's beautiful, gushed Isabel. Thank you. The other 3 mumbled their thank yous in agreement. Then the kids looked at one another. No one was sure exactly what to do next. Should they get up and leave? Should they stay and talk about Pompeii mission? Miss Vader usually gave up tea and cookies, but she wasn't making a move to do that. There was an awkward silence that seemed to last forever. There's another reason why I asked you to come here today, said Miss C. I have some good news and some bad news. Would you like to hear the good news first? I'd rather hear the bad news first, said Isabel. That way we can go home with something positive. Okay, Miss C said. Well, the bad news is that I'm dying. Chapter 2, the Museum of Historic Photography. Okay, well, that was awkward. What do you say when somebody had just told you she's dying? There's really no appropriate response. It's probably best to say nothing. There was some silence for a few tortured moments. The kids knew that Miss Z had been suffering from ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's a nervous system disease that weakens your muscles. ALS is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, after a famous baseball player who died from it in 1941. There's no cure for ALS. It's a progressive disease. Most people who are diagnosed with it only live between 2 and 5 years. The Flashback 4 could see that Miss Z had declined since they last saw her, but they didn't realize how advanced the disease had become. Miss Vader wiped a tear from her eye. "I'm sorry," Miss Z told the group. "I didn't mean to shock you. I knew this was going to happen to me at some point, and now it has. The doctor gave me the news last week. To be perfectly blunt about it, I have a few months left, maybe more if I'm lucky, but statistics don't usually lie." Miss Z had come to accept her situation, and she was quite matter-of-fact about the whole thing. That broke the tension at least a little. "We're so sorry," each of the kids mumbled. "So what's the good news?" asked David. "The good news," Miss Z said more cheerfully as she pulled 4 embossed envelopes out of her desk drawer and handed one to each of the kids, "is that the Museum of Historic Photography is about to open." For much of her life, Miss Z had dreamed of building a museum and filling it with photos of the most important events in history. The museum, she hoped, would be her legacy. She didn't want to be remembered just for creating a silly dating website. So she worked very hard over the last few years to secure a location for a museum, get the proper permits, hire an architect, and complete the necessary paperwork to turn the project for a dream into reality. It had been a race against the clock. "That's wonderful," Isabel said. "Congratulations." "Thank you," Miss Z replied. "I knew that if I didn't want to make it happen fast, it wouldn't get done. You know, I have no children. After I'm gone, who knows what will happen to my estate. Even if I instructed in my will that my money should go toward the building museum, I have no confidence that it will ever be built. As long as I'm alive, I'm in control of where my money goes." "So that's why all the photos are gone from the walls in here," noted Luke. "Exactly," said Miss Z. "They're being hung at the museum as we speak. It opens 1 week from today. You're all invited to the ribbon cutting ceremony. Of course, it wouldn't be right if the Flashback 4 wasn't there. I hope you can make it." The kids looked at their invitations. "It says that the ribbon-cutting ceremony is a black tie." Luke said, "I don't have a black tie. Actually, I don't have any ties. I just borrowed them from my dad." Miss Z laughed. "Oh, black tie doesn't mean you actually have to wear a black tie," she told Luke. "You can wear whatever you like." Luke was still puzzled. Why would the guests be asked to wear a black tie if they didn't have to wear one? It made no sense at all. But then, except for Julia, none of the others had much experience in the strange habits of spectacularly wealthy people. The original plan had been for Miss Z's museum to be a short walk from the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., but that hadn't worked out for various legal reasons. Miss Z had been able to acquire land from a Boston waterfront, a short walk from the Institute of Contemporary Art. She constructed a 4-story black marble building with a large circular window poking out of the front of it so the building would look like a giant camera. That was intentional, of course. A big sign on the grass out front said, "MOF, the Museum of Historic Photography." Julia, Isabel, Luke, and David arrived early, not realizing that you're supposed to show up fashionably late at these types of events. They were dressed in their nicest clothes, which was no problem for Julia. She always looked for an excuse to dress up. The boys looked awkward in their suits, which they've worn for every wedding, funeral, bar mitzvah, and confirmation they had been forced to attend. David's suit was at least one size too small, and he had grown several inches in the last year. The kids stood on their grass taking pictures and gawking at the limousines pulled up and local Boston bigwigs and celebrities got out. The kids had never seen so many rich people in one place. Some of them actually did wear black ties. There were news trucks too, with on-camera reporters and cameramen getting ready to go live. The place was swarming with TV, radio, and print media. "This place is awesome," David said as he pulled out the front door and walked into the rotunda. Naturally, the walls were covered with historic photos, but some of them blown up to huge proportions. "I can't believe she pulled this off," said Julia. "Hey, she pulled off the board," David said. "Starting a museum is a piece of cake compared to that." Many of the framed photographs on the wall were famous ones the kids had seen in Misty's office: an astronaut sitting on the moon, a mushroom cloud created by the first atomic bomb, the Berlin Wall coming down, the Hindenburg exploding, American soldiers charting the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. The pictures were arranged chronologically, starting with some of the first fuzzy and black-white photos taken back in the 1800s and going all the way to the 21st century. People crowded around the pictures to get a closer look. Some of them took pictures of the pictures. Waiters and waitresses strolled around with trays full of hors d'oeuvres. Luke and David in particular were all over them. Free food. After a few minutes, the crowd parted and Misty made her push Misty's wheelchair into the rotunda. A hush fell over the room, and then a thunderous applause rolled through the crowd as people realized who she was. Misty was smiling. She looked radiant in her red dress. "Speech, speech," somebody hollered. Misty was handed a microphone and she began to speak, haltingly at first, and then with gathering confidence. "Thank you all for coming this evening. As many of you know, photography has been a lifelong passion. As a child, I had a darkened room in my basement where I would spend hours developing and printing my own pictures. Those were some of my happiest days of my life. Back then, of course, photography was an expensive hobby. You actually had to pay for to buy a roll of film. Remember film? Then you had to pay to have the film developed and wait like a week for your pictures to be printed. Remember that? You had to be careful when taking every shot because every photograph cost money. Remember those days, old-timers?" Some of the people in the crowd nodded. "Imagine that," somebody shouted. "A camera that did nothing but take pictures. No text, no email, no Google," hollered somebody else. "How did we survive?" "Those were the good old days," somebody else cracked. "Well, I say these are the good old days," continued Misty. "Today, each of you has a camera in your pocket. I see some of you pointing them at me right now. Today, you can snap 100 pictures and blast them all over the internet instantly. It doesn't cost you a cent. You young people probably take that for granted. To me, it's simply amazing." Misty was starting to feel comfortable with her words, and she continued. "The other day, I heard a young person use an expression that was new to me. Pictures or it didn't happen. That's exactly right. If we don't see a photograph of the event, it's almost like that event never took place. Photographs make things real to us. Who was it that said a picture is worth 1,000 words? It's true. One photo can sum up an event instantly. It doesn't matter what language you speak, and that moment will never be repeated, and it can be captured and saved. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. Oh, I didn't mean to ramble on like this. I'm sorry. I'm supposed to be cutting a ribbon, right?" A couple of guys brought up a thick red ribbon. They stretched it out in front of Miss C. Somebody else brought a big pair of fake scissors and handed it to her. "Thank you," she said, "for helping to make the Museum of Historic Photography a reality. Please enjoy this place, support it, and bring your children with you the next time you visit. Photography is a great way to teach kids about history, and it will be your children, of course, who will determine the history in the future. I now declare the Museum of Historic Photography to be officially open." With that, Misty cut the ribbon. There was a big round of applause. David, Luke, Isabel, and Julia walked through all the galleries of the museum. Some of the photos and videos the kids recognized immediately. Barack Obama being sworn in as president. Several other American presidents taking the oath of office. Martin Luther King Jr. delivering his "I Have a Dream" speech at the Lincoln Memorial. For others, they had to read the plaque on the wall next to the photo to understand what it was about. Harry Truman gleefully holding up a newspaper with the headline, "Dewey defeats Truman." The lone protesters standing in front of a line of tanks at Tiananmen Square in China. Off to the side of the main exhibit area were smaller galleries devoted to historic photos of war, sports, poverty, crime, triumph, tragedy, heroes, and villains. Judging by the reaction of the people in attendance, the museums were a triumph. It took about for an hour for the flashback for it to make their way through the entire museum. At the end, just before the little gift shop, they came to the final gallery. There were a black curtain in front of it and a sign that said, "The Future and Past of Photography." The kids pulled aside the curtain to see the photo on the wall. It was the picture of the Titanic. And we'll stop here.